Hey guys, I just wanted to say before we start the show that we are launching very, very soon the Extreme Health Academy. We are partnering up with one of the best, most cutting-edge holistic doctors in the entire world, Dr. John Bergman, and we're going to be providing online courses, tutorials, workshops, live Q&A, webinars, all kinds of information and tools, practical information that you can use to overcome any kind of health challenge that you're dealing with right now. And if you just want to take your health to the next level, if you want to learn all the latest cutting edge biohacks and everything you need to do to live to 150, 200 years old, that's what the group is going to be doing. So we are very excited about this. And if you guys want to sign up to get access to the best price that it will ever be available, make sure to sign up. And that way you can at least be notified when we open the doors, and you can learn more about it at extremehealthacademy.com. Don't forget to check out our store if you haven't checked it out recently. We've been adding some new products. We added the IMRS 2000 PEMF pad that you can lay on every single night and get pulsed electromagnetic field therapy into your body. We've got the Chili pad. We have got the high-focused Truly Heal PEMF devices. We've got the raw fermentation course, oxygen concentrators, chi machines, Magnetico sleep pads, Soul CBD oils, the Scalar Energy Rest Shield, all kinds of really cool stuff in our store, along with the blenders, juicers, rebounders, and items like that. So if you want to support the show and get some really great products for your health, go to our store. I'll put a link to it at extremehealthradio.com/550. Well, it's good to have my co-host back, my partner in crime, my Bonnie and Clyde.
Aww.
Is that right, Bonnie and Clyde? That's right.
I'm the Bonnie to your Clyde.
That's right. I like that.
Yeah, I like being back. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The Thelma to your Louise.
I like that.
Those are two women, so.
Yeah, that's a little different.
I'm not calling you a woman.
Well, I'm excited to, we're going to be talking with Dr. Dan Engle today, and we're going to be talking about concussions. And before the show, I brought up a little bit of a little stat here. And
What you got?
It's just crazy. It says here that an estimated 1.6 to 3.8 million sports and recreation-related concussions occur in the U.S. each year.
How many?
1.6, basically 1.5 to 3.5 million.
Oh my gosh.
Per year.
Right.
And kids ages 5 to 18 accounted for 2.4 million of those. Which is just crazy, right?
I'm not surprised the way kids play and fall, and they're hardcore, so.
Yeah.
Dang, that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. So we got Dr. Dan Engle, and this is going to be cool because I was looking through his book, and I was going through it, and he's got some really interesting ways of dealing with stuff like this that you won't really hear in mainstream. So this would be really cool. So let me introduce Dan in just a second. Let me just read a couple lines of his bio here for good measure. He's a board-certified, he's an MD. He's a board-certified psychiatrist at the medical, and the medical director at Rejuvenation and Performance Institute in Sedona, Arizona. And he combines natural medicine with integrative psychiatry to enhance the foundations of energetic health, peak performance training, practical spirituality, and his list of accolades goes on. And it was really cool. We got to meet him in person to talk about Ibogaine when he was traveling from Mexico back to us. So that was cool. All right, let me turn up his microphone. Dr. Dan, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you great.
Oh, excellent. Well, glad to have you on, my friend.
It's good to be back.
Yeah,
sure.
What have you been up to since we last spoke?
Wow, when was that?
That was a couple years ago.
Year and a half to 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Time flies.
Doesn't it?
Oh, wow.
Is that good or bad?
It's such a dynamic time. Things are moving and accelerating in so many different arenas and institutions and fields all the time, and it's at times staggering and a little bit challenging to keep up with the data and the research and what everybody's up to. And the opportunity to talk today about the Concussion Repair Manual is essentially the synthesis of 10 to 20 years of research, but it's as much of the latest information that I could put in there as possible. So that's been a fair bit of my focus over the last couple of years since we spoke last.
Are you still working out in Arizona?
I split time between California and Arizona.
Okay. That's awesome. And I was looking over the book this morning, and gosh, it's so cool. You have so many different treatments that you don't necessarily hear from mainstream practitioners in terms of health. So, first of all, how did you get into? Why did you want to do something like this?
Well, it was essentially putting myself in a lab that I didn't expect to do. After my sixth pretty significant concussion, my fifth one is one that I put in the introduction because it's just so visual, where I broke my neck and was wearing a halo right before medical school started. So as I started medical school, my 4-year med school ID showed me in the halo. So it was kind of actually a good icebreaker for clients that I would see in the hospital, because, they see somebody walk in and you're just another guy in a suit or a lab coat. But then when they see, you've got this like big halo thing in your ID, it just breaks the ice right away. And like, oh, okay, well, you've been on the other side. You've been a patient. You kind of know what it could be like in my shoes. So it just built rapport straight away. And then in my psychiatry training, I had my sixth concussion, got turned upside down in a snowboard park, put an 8-inch crack in the back of my helmet, and then there was this voice in the background that said, "You just crossed the line."
Oh, wow.
And I'd had a lot of head injuries prior to that, and even after breaking my neck, I never heard that voice and had that sense of impending doom.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. And, so right when it happened, you heard the voice?
Over the next 3 months, I started having problems with attention, focus, concentration, mood dysregulation, sleep, hypersomnolence as opposed to insomnia, which some people have. And the classic post-concussive syndrome, I'm going to date myself a little bit. This is 20 years ago when I was still in my psychiatry residency. And at that time, my psychiatry attending physicians, like the teaching physicians on our rotations, and the neurologists teaching us as well, none of them had a good solution for what to do after a concussion. The standard care, which isn't totally different than now, the standard of care was go home, rest, we hope it gets better. And it's the same thing for stroke rehabilitation, same thing for trying to reverse Alzheimer's disease. These are all very different insults to the brain, but there is still an inflammatory cascade. There's still an active potential to intervene to alleviate that inflammation, to get the neurons talking together again, to decrease the interference field and the downstream effects of that insult. And after I started having symptoms and nobody I was talking with had any good solutions, I started researching it on myself and tried on every methodology in the manual, except stem cells. I haven't done that yet. And found and a whole lot of other things too. Tried, and what worked I kept, and started working with clients and devising protocols a lot for athletes from youth sports up to pro sports and Olympic gold medal athletes, who, because of a variety of different just pushing the envelope combat sports or maybe just accidents in general, had a series of concussions and started having problems with cognitive and physical performance. So those protocols essentially became like the working treatment arm for our cohort. And those protocols became the manual, and the manual became the book.
Wow. Yeah, I was reading something recently about it's so crazy. This was written by a medical doctor, and it was the 4 pillars of healing from or healing a concussion. It was, the first one was don't drink alcohol. The second one was only eat cooked foods. The third one was take raw ginger in your water if your stomach is upset. And the fourth one was just rest. I mean, it's so basic. I mean, that's just basically nothing.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's challenging to stay in the medical paradigm in a system that is built for acute care management. And that's what we do really well. After I broke my neck, I didn't go see my herbalist or my homeopathist or, my integrative practitioner in a variety of different spheres, I needed to go get acute care management, triage, stabilization in the emergency room setting, and get a big halo external fixation device screwed into my skull so that it could stabilize that fracture. And then after that, once the acute care situation is stabilized and managed, then we move into the healing arts, of all of which are chiropractic care, naturopathic care, Chinese medicine care, Ayurvedic medical care, herbology, and the like. So we can bring in, once we've established a triage acute care management protocol and it's been stabilized, then somebody can use the techniques and methodologies in the manual. But the manual doesn't take place of that acute care stabilization phase.
Gotcha.
Now, I'm curious, for people that aren't familiar, what is a concussion? Are there different types of concussions? That we were speaking with someone, a friend of ours, on the show a while back about concussions, and he was talking about the ligaments that hold the brain to the brain stem and to the skull on the inside of the skull. Those get kind of damaged as well. Essentially, what people talk about concussions is just basically like a bruise to the brain, but there's more going on there, isn't there?
There is. And it's really fascinating, too. Everybody's brain is different, and that everybody's personality and mind and hearts are different. So it's fascinating to me that every snowflake is unique. Mm-hmm. Like if you look at every single snowflake under a microscope, they're all unique. That's staggering to me. Mm-hmm. And it's the same for people and their brains too. So when somebody's healing from a TBI or a concussion, the level of severity of concussion does not predict its improvement, which also just seems kind of fascinating. You would think that the more severe concussions would take longer to heal, but that's not the case. You can have somebody go through a mild TBI and they can have a worse chronic issue than somebody going through a severe TBI who might heal pretty efficiently and with zero or little obvious long-term negative impacts. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to know that because we can't necessarily predict who's going to get better, and there's no such thing as a tough brain, then it's also important to manage people's symptomatology and the neurologic impact of that trauma individually with protocols that are specific to them. Mm-hmm. Now, there are certain things that just make sense. And the list that you offered of those 4 pillars, some of that makes a lot of sense. Like, yes, definitely get good rest. We need to be able to do that, to be able to heal. And that includes rest from the computer and rest from a lot of bright lights and bright noise, because everything's going to be heightened. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden now there's this massive inflammatory cascade going on in the brain and the entire neurologic system. And we need to be able to insulate that, calm that down, and give it as much nutrifying, reparative compounds and protocols and processes as possible. So rest is important. And yes, don't drink alcohol. That makes sense too, because alcohol is neurotoxic. So there are things to stay away from. Stress, getting another concussion. That's probably the biggest one.
Is it?
And that's the challenge for a lot of people who have reputations and big contracts on the line. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So some guys don't report their head injuries because if they have to sit out too long, then it might jeopardize their position on the team. It might jeopardize their income. And when somebody's in that acute care management phase and they get another insult to the brain, then now there's an exponential effect. 1 + 1 = like 10, 20, and 50 as far as the potential long-term negative impact.
Yeah, there was a guy in our gym when I used to work out at the gym, a former NFL athlete, and he would tell me that. He would tell me that, there'd be football players that just wouldn't report any of their injuries because that would impact, like if they were going to sign a contract coming up, if that was a contract year for them and it was really critical for them to get an extension or something, they wanted to play through it just so that they can get that next big extension. And
so does that mean they never got treatment at all? They just went home and dealt with it? Or they...
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what he was saying, that,
Dang.
yeah, people would just ignore the symptoms and hope it went away. And I mean,
Ooh,
it's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, our friend Tana and her husband, former MMA fighter, Trey, he, I think is looking to do some stuff there as well, in terms of healing. And I think of them as an MMA fighter being obviously, boxers, MMA fighters and that type of thing. But Dan, is it true that people can get concussions from simple things like hitting a soccer ball? Is that true, do you think?
That's where the majority of mine came from.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
because I started playing soccer when I was 4, played all the way up through college. And so,
Wow.
that's 17 years or so.
But how did you know that you had them?
Constant impact, and my position as like center lead defender was to make sure that the opposing forwards didn't get the ball. And anytime there was a punt from the opposite goalie to our side, it was kind of my job to head it back into our offensive third. And so you're taking these huge skyrocketed punts out of the air directly into a forehead, with sometimes if you're in the air, there's not as much of an impact because you now have a little bit of give. But if you're planted on the ground and you head a ball forward, then you just have that static blow. And it's the chronic problems like this where there's the significant frontal head trauma or contusion that starts to disrupt a lot of the executive functions, because the prefrontal cortex right behind the forehead, that part of the brain governs all of our decision making, tracking, information storage, shifting sets. It's like all of the cognitive stuff, including attention, focus, concentration, memory, input. And over time, it does set up this kind of like bruised or really challenged tapioca style experience in the brain. And when they've looked at pro soccer players, so right now there's a lot of data and input and media publicity in the NFL for what's called CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And it's essentially an early Alzheimer's type picture in the brain that happens after a whole lot of head injuries. And the old title for this for the boxers were like the punch drunk syndrome. And now we have a new fancier term for it because we can see histologically on autopsy what that brain actually looks like. And it looks like a really damaged, bruised, old brain in a fairly young person.
Wow.
So you're seeing these accelerated dementia-like changes that we wouldn't expect to see until people are like 80, 90, or maybe even 100 years old.
Right.
Now you're starting to see those happen at like in your 30s. And same is true for college athletes that have been playing football for a long period of time, were in some kind of injury or accident, died, their brains were looked at on autopsy, already showing CTE-like pictures. And the same is true for pro soccer players. So we tend to think of soccer as not being as much of a combat sport as football or MMA fighting, or maybe even hockey. And that could be true. But because of the nature of those chronic hits, especially in a defensive position where you're heading the ball all the time, it makes sense that we would see those kinds of changes. And not only do you see those changes with pro soccer players who are in those positions when you look at the brain on autopsy,
right.
We can also see those cognitive changes and the cognitive performance changes. Studies show that pro players over the arc of, into their 30s and 40s will now have problems with attention, focus, concentration, all of the executive functions in that same part of the brain that gets chronic trauma.
That's fascinating. Do we have any information, like have they ever done studies where just with heading the balls in soccer, pounds per square inch of pressure that goes onto a kid's forehead or an adult's forehead. Do we know that?
I'm sure there have been. And it's a good question. To be honest, I have never researched that mechanical load myself. I'm kind of curious. One of my bad head injuries came from getting a full volley from actually one of my own teammates because he was playing Defender 2, and it was like late in the game and we're up 1-0, and it was one of our playoff games, and it got kind of bounced around the box, and he just completely smashed that ball, and I just happened to be right in the way, and I was like 3 feet away from it, and it hit me in my right temple. And I didn't know who I was, didn't know where I was standing in the middle of the field, completely dazed. They had to come get me off of the field, escort me off of the field, and I was in shock.
Wow.
I had never completely been fully depersonalized from myself in life. So that happens, and so it's one of those examples. Like, the soccer ball is a leather ball, right? Shouldn't be a big deal. Well, when you crank it that hard and the brain bounces around like a ping pong ball inside the skull, it can lead to some pretty significant trauma.
So it's crazy.
I'm over here making like yucky faces. I hate that. I hate thinking about what really goes on in the brain. What were you going to say, Jay?
Oh, no, I was just curious. So you really got into this because, of your own personal experience. I mean, a lot of people get into it just because they're interested, but I mean, you're interested, plus you have your own, experience that you have to treat yourself. So, and you just said the word experiment too, and that's essentially what it was, because there wasn't any available scientific information, at least in the mainstream medical literature, about how to heal concussion, even from the most reputable neurologic institutions. I mean, there was some like marginal experimental therapy doing things like stem cells, but that was in such a small little cohort, and that's not what most people are going to do. So what would your average person do? Well, your average person is just told to go home and rest, and we hope it gets better, and that was not satisfying. So the question I'm trying to figure out is, as far as I understand, the testing for concussions isn't very thorough, and they can't really find, from just a little bit of research I did, it's not like you can get a test and find out exactly where on the brain the bruises occurred. So correct me if I'm wrong about that, but if that's the case, and someone does have a concussion, if they feel like they do and exuding all the signs and symptoms of it, they get the concussion, and then the current model is just to sort of rest and relax and wait for it to heal. If they can't really have really great testing to begin with to know 100% if that's what they have, then how do they know that they're healed if the tests don't work that great?
Great question. Ideally, every athlete in a competitive sport would have baseline neurologic testing done when they're well.
Okay.
So we know what baseline, their kind of example of wellness, because everybody's going to have a different wellness picture. But what does their neurologic system look like when they're in a fairly healthy state? And that means your basic neurologic exam, but it also means cognitive performance exam. So you can get what's called a quantified EEG or cognitive testing done to see what your reaction time is, your ability to shift sets, attention, focus, concentrate, put memory into short term and then retrieve it, etc. There are a lot of the different cognitive parameters that can be tested. Once we know what your baseline is, then if you get an injury, we can test the results compared to your baseline and know now how much of an impact that injury has made. That also can give us better ideas as far as where the injury is, but the location of the injury doesn't really dictate, at least in the vast majority of treatments at this point in time. The location of the injury doesn't necessarily dictate the type of treatment, because the brain is going to go through a global inflammatory cascade. There will be focal points that will be more helpful to orient towards, and therefore you could do the example of that might be something like transcranial magnetic stimulation, that if you were localizing that to a particular part of the skull where that direct impact happened, you might get some more preferential expanded benefit. But all of the treatments generally are beneficial to the brain as a whole, and the brain as a whole works in concert, and it's very plastic and malleable. You can take out whole parts of the brain, or you can lose function in whole parts of the brain, like after a stroke. And the areas around that area that have been insulted or hurt will start to grow in and take over. And so you'll get like a bit of a, like, kind of like if you had a plant in the garden and you ripped that plant out, but yet the rest of the garden was still nutrified, the rest of the garden would eventually seep in and take over that hole, right? So that's kind of what we're trying to do. Here, we're not necessarily, it's not a stroke where a part of the brain has been irrevocably damaged, although that will happen over time. That's what the CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy, picture looks like. It's really hard. Kind of like Alzheimer's disease. It's much easier to correct it in the early stages than in the very long advanced stages. So all of the treatments and methodologies that we stack on top of one another, for example, we can work with the primary, what I call the primary therapies themselves, that are essentially the basic building blocks of life: water, electromagnetism, light, energy, and nutrition. Right? All, I mean, that's just basic building blocks of life. So water, I don't know if I put oxygen in there. So water, for example, would like be in a flotation tank, as just one example of a water therapy for TBI recovery. The reason float tanks are so good for TBI is that they reset the neuroendocrine system, and it's like meditation on steroids. And if you want a quiet, calm environment, there's very few experiences that are more quiet and calming than a float tank, because there's no external stimuli. Another water would be just adequate hydration, hydration at the cellular level. If somebody had a huge amount of toxicity, then you could get in like colon hydrotherapy, and that's a whole nother discussion. Oxygen therapy, like hyperbaric oxygen, is extraordinarily beneficial. And unfortunately, the data is still fairly small, but the data that we have is good. It's a little bit equivocal as far as like what pressures are the best, what frequency, and what total number of treatments, but like 1.5 atmospheres over 30 to 40 treatments at 60 to 90 minutes has shown to be extraordinarily beneficial in helping people heal from chronic stroke, like months out of their stroke.
Wow.
Not just in the acute care phase.
That's interesting. What effect have you seen with the cold laser therapy? Also immensely helpful. And it's one of those primary therapies, and we're talking about light. So you have low-level laser therapy, or a la cold laser therapy, that has 40 to 50 years of deep data, mostly from the Soviet Union and Europe. We don't do a whole lot of, we're just now catching kind of up to these more primal therapies. But same thing goes for oxygen, light, and pulse electromagnetic fields. All of those have been studied for decades and decades, and we're just now in the West kind of catching up to that data. And so cold laser therapy is immensely helpful in rehabilitating the cellular mechanisms of energy production. So essentially driving what's called ATP production. ATP is the energy currency of every cell. So it not only kickstarts into a more active production line of ATP and energy, it also can do what's called clearing out the interference fields. Because kind of like if you have a hose that you have water running through and you park your car on top of it, well, the water pressure out that hose, the water flow out that hose is going to go way down, and the pressure is going to back up.
Right.
And so when you have an injury or an insult or a bruise or scar tissue build up in particular areas of any part of the body, but particularly in the neurologic system, it has a way of kinking that energetic pathway. The Chinese medicine term for that would be the meridians. Mm-hmm. So when the meridians or the chi lines or the energy lines get kinked, something like cold laser therapy can help unkink that hose and that wiring to make it more effective than it was before. And 10, 20 years ago, we in the West as allopathic physicians, we thought acupuncture was just silly. You couldn't see it. You couldn't test it.
I know, right?
You couldn't tell what you were doing. There wasn't like any observable effect under a microscope. So we just thought it was bullshit. Yeah. And that's just kind of what we do. Unfortunately, if we can't through our own lens identify why something's working, we typically ridicule it as opposed to getting curious about it. And so that is actually how I studied with acupuncturists. My first clinic was in an acupuncturist's office and studied with chiropractors and naturopaths because I'm just constantly curious about what I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly trying to keep that beginner's mind because there's always more to learn. And now, 20 years later or so, acupuncture in Chinese medicine is a 5,000-year-old science, and we're just now catching on in the West to this. And mostly it's a grassroots movement because people recognize that it works. And it works for pain management. It works for insomnia. It helps the system recalibrate to it and to a whole kind of concert amongst itself. Mm-hmm. And so instead of being reductionistic, we're looking at the organism as a whole and the energy system as a whole. And Chinese medicine is very much in that kind of like more integrated medical philosophy. Mm-hmm. So cold laser and low-level laser therapy has been immensely helpful. I've used it on and off for probably 5 years. Mm-hmm. Not as much now because typically I'll try something out, and if it works, great. And then I'll typically move on to something else because I want to see if that works. Right. And so that's why I put so many different tools and technologies in the manual, because I'm constantly just looking for what works, and I'm trying to put protocols that are as effective and efficient as possible that the majority of people can access into a user's guide to be able to show them or kind of walk them through the process of assessing what's going to work for them. Because cold lasers work, but they don't work for everybody. Mm-hmm. They don't work for every injury. Some people respond really quickly to acupuncture or flotation therapy or nutritional rehabilitation, as long as the gut's open and the microbiota is kind of reestablished in a healthy balance. So everybody, because it's so individual, and everybody's individual, but I just think brains are so individual too, and everybody's healing recovery, particularly after brain injury, is going to be individual.
And
so I wanted to just put together this book as it's both a textbook and a workbook so that people can actually use it to see what's going to work for them.
So what kind of effects have you had from PEMF? For those that aren't familiar, PEMF is pulse electromagnetic field therapy. Do you use the high frequency or the low frequency, and what kind of effects do you have or have you seen? I
have used both. I prefer the more low frequency units. I have a unit called a beamer. Mm-hmm. And it has a sinusoidal wave pattern that's more equilibrated and resonant with the human biofield. Mm-hmm. And so the body's able to essentially utilize those frequencies in a more effective capacity. Now, there's a whole lot of different kind of views on levels of intensity. I'm kind of from a culture and from a childhood upbringing that says more is better.
I know, right?
So I tend to go for the higher end and then work my way backwards and see, oftentimes more is not better.
That's Justin right there.
Yeah, that's you're describing
He'll
me.
Be doing like 5 machines at once. I'm like, do you think that's a good idea?
Right. Man for my own heart, right?
Yeah.
Right. We want to, like, if something's going to work, I want to push it. And I want to see, okay, what's the window at which it stops becoming beneficial and starts becoming detrimental.
I see, yeah.
And then back up a little bit,
okay.
Right? So push it. Oh, now it's tweaky. I'll back up. And therefore, at that point, usually I can get the biggest bang for my buck.
So the issue, I mean, you have a lot of cool stuff in your chapter.
Just to close that loop, because PEMF helps with what's called vasomotion.
Mm-hmm.
It helps stimulate the microcirculation, and that's extraordinarily beneficial for traumatic brain injury recovery. Most of the blood volume in our bodies is in the microcirculation. It's not in the big vessels. It's not in the arteries and the veins. 75% of the blood is in the microcirculation. And when we have challenges in microcirculation, like with diabetic foot ulcers or people with Alzheimer's kind of dementias, Alzheimer's is actually a type 3 diabetic picture in the brain.
Right.
And oftentimes we're having clogs in that microcirculation pattern. So we're not able to have adequate nutrient exchange, oxygen exchange, debris and toxicity removal. Everything starts to get a little wonky and shut down. So when we're stimulating the microcirculation, we're up-leveling the physiologic impact, and it can be similar. Unfortunately, we don't have as active a culture as we had before or would be ideal to have again. It's recommended that people walk between 10,000 and 20,000 steps a day. The average is less than 1,000.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Right. Because most people are sitting behind computers all day long or sitting in their car for like 2 to 4 hours of commute time, or at least that's the average here in the Bay Area.
Wow.
Per day.
And watching TV.
I was going to say TV is a big one.
TV time.
Yeah, that's another really big one. Right. So
we
sit behind the computer, we sit behind the wheel, and we sit behind the TV. We're just sitting all the time. And so we're not having that just like thump, thump, walking on the ground movement that stimulates circulation. So a lot of these therapies are just mimicking the repatterning of what makes us effective physiologic creatures: light, water, movement or electromagnetism, nutrition, and oxygen. Right? Most people don't breathe very deeply anymore. And you get people into like Wim Hof style breathing or holotropic breathwork style breathing patterns, and people have these like epiphanies and awakening experiences. Well, yeah, you're finally getting oxygen to your brain. That's supposed to work that way.
Interesting, fascinating information, right? What do you think about Dr. Engle so far? Pretty cool guy. I really like him a lot. You can check out his website too at concussionrepairmanual.com. And if you guys want to grab the show notes, we've taken some great show notes for you today, and you can get access to the show as well as the different sponsors that we've sponsored the show with. And I just want to tell you recently, I've been just loving my Bellicon rebounder. I don't know if you guys have one of these things yet, but I recommend them to everybody. And for the longest time, I used to jump on one of those cheap trampolines from Walmart or whatever, and my knee, I have a torn ACL, and I just couldn't do it. It was just really making my knee very sore. But I'd highly recommend checking out the Bellicon. If you guys want to add to your sort of repertoire of health tools and health gadgets and health devices to help you guys, become healthier at your home, I'd really recommend checking out the Bellicon rebounders. What I like about them is that they're made with using flexi rope, so they don't use those loud springs that need to be replaced or anything like that. I've had mine for 5 years now, and I use it every single day for about 30 minutes a day. And what I've been loving lately is jumping outside I take it outside, and I get some sunshine, I get some grounding to the earth, I get fresh air, and I get exercise, and I listen to podcasts while I do that. And rebounding is just an amazing exercise. It's unlike any other exercise. It increases endorphins, circulation. It's a cellular exercise, so it helps to massage and stimulate every single cell in the body. And one of the biggest aspects of it is helping to improve bone density, and as well as cleansing and getting rid of lymphatic toxins and lymphatic fluid that gets stagnant in our bodies. And it's one of the only exercises that you can do to cleanse and purify your lymphatic system. And you have more lymph fluid in your body than you do blood. So I highly recommend this exercise. It's, it's for everyone. And I used to think it was kind of like in the 70s where, you'd have leotards on and leg warmers, and it was just a 1970s kind of deal. But, I like surfing, I like hiking, I like weightlifting. And I also rebound, and it's just an amazing exercise. So I highly recommend, as part of your longevity protocol, as part of your disease prevention protocol, as part of a daily cleansing protocol. It's just a great exercise to do. So check those out in our store, if you would. And also something else I've been doing lately too is this Chi Gong program. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Chi Gong. Chi Gong is an ancient sort of Chinese exercise. It's like Tai Chi. It's been around for, I think, over 6,000 years. And there's a reason for it. It's like traditional Chinese medicine just because it works. And I do meditation and I do all kinds of strategies like that. But there's something about doing a moving meditation. And what's cool is you can also get magnets from them and do the Qigong standing on these high-powered earth magnets, which I haven't done yet. I want to try those pretty soon. But you can do Qigong. You can put it on your iPod and or your iPhone or whatever and do it outside, grounded, under the moon, under the stars, or I just do it in my bedroom here. And what's cool about it is like it's a moving meditation. So it takes about 10 minutes in the morning and about 10 minutes in the evening. And there's a reason why ancient Chinese sages and masters all practice Qigong. It's a credible way to ground yourself, to restore your energy, to, it's a great tool if you give out a lot of energy, if people suck the energy and the life force from you. It's a great tool to ground yourself and to do every single day. And like I said, you only have to do it 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening, and you get access to the full course right when you purchase it. And Tristan Truscott and Peter Ragnar will walk you through everything about how to do it and what all the movements mean. And once you memorize it all, you can just continue to do it on your own time. And it's just a great longevity exercise. I love it myself, and I think you will too. So make sure, if you guys want to check out the sauna or the Qigong program, make sure to check them out on this show page. I think you guys will really like it. I'll put a link to it at extremehealthradio.com/550. Yeah, it's fascinating. I was just listening to a podcast, one of the recent ones from Dave Asprey over on Bulletproof, and he had a guy on talking about, oh gosh, what is the name of the Buteyko breathing method? And we did a show a while back about that, but I want to have this guy on too. But he was just talking about exactly that, breathing through your nose and how important that is for neurological function, for overall health, stress reduction, anti-inflammatory, circulation, and sleep. Yeah. It's so incredible. Just breathing through your nose does all these things.
Especially when we're exercising.
Yeah.
Because it has a way of keeping the nervous system in a easier state of regulation. Mm-hmm. It's not getting so driven to sympathetic overdrive.
Yep.
And fight flight. If we're able to exercise still at fairly peak performance levels, but maintain nasal breathing, we're having more of a synergistic balance between the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating.
We're not getting as taxed on the other side.
So, what do you recommend for, some of these therapies? We're just talking about low-level laser therapy, flotation therapy, some of the oxygen stuff, the PEMF. A lot of these come with big price tags for, a lot of the products. I know with the oxygen therapy, I know they have home units now where you can have your own oxygen tank at home, and but these things are, $15,000. And so what do you, like, if someone wants to try all of these and is kind of pinched for cash, is there one you would, recommend first that could be the most powerful, or do they need to make that decision, or how does all that work?
Ideally, somebody's working with a coach or a trained practitioner that knows TBI recovery, and they're not just doing it totally on their own.
Okay.
I wrote the book so that people could do it totally on their own, because unfortunately there's just not enough practitioners available. Mm-hmm. And so I'm kind of, I'm saying both at the same time. Try and find a practitioner, but if you don't, then try and do it on your own. And pick the methodologies that I put in there. I gave as much information as far as why I think those could be helpful for a particular person at a particular state. The usual rules always apply, which is get good rest, try and modulate stress, eat well, and there's some targeted supplements that have a lower price tag than something like hyperbaric oxygen. And targeted supplementation can be really helpful. For example, like really good therapeutic doses of fish oil at like 6 grams a day is extraordinarily helpful for the inflamed brain. You could go up to 10 grams a day if somebody's like in an acute traumatic experience. I was just on a podcast with JJ Virgin, whose son was in the ICU, and they wanted to take him off life support. And she was like, well, that's not going to happen. So she started smuggling in fish oil and I think maybe progesterone.
Oh my gosh.
But it was probably the fish oil that helped because the brain's 60 some odd percent, 68 or so percent fat.
Wow. Yeah.
And DHA and EPA from fish oil, these omega-3 fatty acids, build new neurons. And they're also extraordinarily anti-inflammatory to the brain. That's why Jeff Spencer, who used to train the Tour de France team, that was one of the few things that he recommended to all his cyclists was fish oil, because it's such a great anti-inflammatory. So that's a great, easy price point. Two best fish oils on the market over the counter that people can just go to like Whole Foods and get, or probably Whole Foods probably is best as far as like over the counter supplements. Nordic Naturals and Carlson's.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So, and 6 grams, that's a pretty good dose. That's still going to be like $40 a month. And so for some people, that might be a pinch. And so what can you do? Hopefully that's still in somebody's price point, and to be able to get off of sugar, because sugar is inflammatory to the brain. Stop alcohol, stop tobacco. Nicotine's a performance enhancer for the brain, but it causes vasoconstriction. Mm-hmm. So you're not getting, we were just talking about vasomotion and blood perfusion. There's certain things to stay away from. There are certain things to do. Nutrition, targeted supplementation, and some of these practices, breath practices, can be helpful. But this is why I'm so adamant that it's ideal for people to, and this is going to be part of the concussion repair manual, is we're getting a whole host of coaches together. I'm working with 3 different organizations to bring coaches available. We're going to put it on our platform to be able to work with people healing from TBI and concussion, because the injured brain, we're all used to our comforts, right? So if you get a whole lot of people after New Year's Eve that go sign up for the gym, how many people 3 months down the road are still going to the gym? Not many, right? Less than 10%. Mm-hmm. And the people that do go to the gym have a coach, or they have a high degree of motivation and a high degree of accountability. So it's super helpful when we're going through a process of building in new habits to have a coach. Mm-hmm. That's ever more important when somebody has a head injury, because head injuries by nature screw up your motivation, attention, focus, concentration, your ability to track your results, to organize spreadsheets and timelines, and to essentially be your own coach. It's really freaking hard to do that when you have a head injury. I know from experience, and I've worked with a lot of friends, family, and clients that have been in that same experience. It's really freaking hard to get motivated. Some of that's because the master glands in the brain get severely impacted, and then the hypothalamus, pituitary, and pineal can't tell the rest of the body how to operate. So the adrenals get sluggish, the thyroid gets sluggish, the hormonal system gets downregulated typically, is what happens. So you don't have as much juice in the tank, and your brain's a little scrambled. So that's really freaking hard to kind of motivate yourself to go through a whole recuperative brain optimization program. That's why it can be so helpful to have a coach or some kind of integrated practitioner who knows this kind of stuff. And that could be a naturopath, it could be a chiropractor. There's functional neurologic chiropractic that's an amazing intervention. One of my friends, Kevin Ballister, swears by that. I've actually not done so much of that myself, but the program that he works with is a company called Revive in Denver, and they're just like one of an example. Other examples, and this is when we start to, bring out a little bit higher price point. You were asking earlier about what can we look at when the brain is injured to see that it's damaged. Daniel Amen, who has half a dozen or so clinics across the country called the Amen Clinics, is one of the pioneers of something called SPECT scans, SPECT. And essentially it shows the brain like a cartoon, like in a 3-dimensional, colorful pictograph of what it would look like. And good, juicy, healthy young brains look like balloons with dimples, so to speak.
I like it.
But injured brains look like Swiss cheese. Like a whole chunk has been taken out. That's what Alzheimer's looks like. That's what being addicted to crystal meth for a long number of years looks like. That's what TBIs look like. Do Google search, image search, SPECT scan, brain injury, and you'll see literally what the brain is functioning like. Now, just because that big chunk has been taken out of that picture doesn't mean like you've lost that part of your brain, but it shows the down regulation in functional capacity that's happened as a result of that injury.
Wow.
So now that big kind of like bite taken out is the area of the brain that's not working. So if we know that that's true, now we have an active baseline post-injury, and then we bring in a series of interventions. Ideally, if money wasn't an issue, we would do hyperbarics, we would do flotation, we would do low-level laser therapy, we would do targeted supplementation, we would do all of those things in concert with one another because they're all stackable therapies.
Right.
And then you get an exponential benefit, and then you would see after 1, 2, 3 months down the road, usually 2 to 3 months down the road, do another picture, and you see the brains rehabilitate. And it's phenomenal when that happens. And unfortunately, not everybody has access, like you said, to those kinds of treatments. So it becomes more and more important to find practitioners that can guide the interventions and maximize the potential that you're going to use an intervention that's going to work, but that's also reasonable for your price point, and that it's also reasonable in its availability. Like there aren't hyperbaric oxygen chambers all over the country. And sometimes when people go through protocols, they need like 20 to 40 treatments. That could be 20 grand. Right? So sometimes when people are going through these kind of TBI protocols, they do get chambers at home. I'm working with another organization, and we're going to start making home units so that they're more available at a lower price point.
Yeah, I think the ones that I saw were about like 15 grand, weren't they?
It depends. It depends on the pressure. The soft chambers for home use, for pressures, for home use chamber soft shells, you can only get up to 1.3 atmospheres. And that's still, the data is still good for hyperbaric at 1.3 to 1.5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Years for cognitive recovery and brain recovery after TBI. 1.5 you need a hard chamber for. So the soft shells are like, 15 to 20K. And the hard chambers are, you could get used hard chambers at home, although you're not supposed to have that because you need a physician's oversight and prescription. You can get a used hard chamber for like, 15 to 30.
Wow. And what do the new ones go for?
0.5 to 2 atmospheres.
And what do the new ones go for?
It depends. Some of the really new, I just visited a hyperbaric facility in Los Altos yesterday, in a Bay Area hyperbarics, and they have 4 chambers. 2 are like the new state-of-the-art. They look like plexiglass. It's not plexiglass. I'm just spacing on the material. And it's transparent, so you can see through it, and it looks and feels really spacious. Some of the old ones look like diving bells. Yeah,
I've seen those ones.
Big and kind of bulky, and there's these small little portals that you can look through. Those are just as effective, and some people prefer those because you have a sense of being held a little bit more, and it's like kind of, it's more of a meditative experience. So it depends on if you, acrylic. That's the see-through material.
Oh, right.
It depends on the material it's made of, the size, the year, and its depth, which means like how much pressure is it rated to. Some are rated to like 2.5 to 3. Some are rated up to 6 or even 9. So a new average unit at that level of a hard shell using like 2.5 to 4 atmospheres or so of pressure is going to be somewhere between 50 and 70K.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's quite. So you're working to try to get these things more available for people for more cost-effective prices?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then what happens too is you start to develop, and this is part of what we want to do with the community building aspect of hyperbaric medicine, is to provide people with units, but also to start. My vision is for us to take our healthcare back and to invest with one another and build our own centers for healing. So that if you have a neighborhood organization and everybody comes together and pools their money and resources together to open up a community hub with physician oversight, or at least physician support, maybe not liability, and some physicians are a little tweaky about that kind of stuff, but we need to be able to take our healthcare back because the system's really broken. And the system's designed for acute care management. Great. So that's what we need emergency departments for. But nobody gets better in the hospital. They just get stabilized in the hospital. Mm-hmm. So where do they go to get better? They usually go to the clinics. Well, clinics are great too. If we have community-oriented centers and clinics where these kind of methodologies are available, if we can do that at the neighborhood level, awesome. If we can do that at the community regenerative medicine clinic level, awesome. Right now, we need to have buy-in from the general populace to recognize that this is an empowered choice. We have the opportunity to take responsibility for our healthcare again and invest in those tools and technologies that we know are going to be helpful, and be able to provide those to our brothers and sisters who also need that level of support, so that it's not only something that people with disposable income can access.
Yeah.
Because particularly with something like chronic disease, cancer, or like long-standing effect from TBI, when your brain doesn't work, it's hard to be productive and like make money and take care of yourself. And so you need support. And this is why I think we're just really challenged in a global picture of medical care, at least in our country, is that we are so separate from one another. We're stuck on social media, but you know, we're connected with 5,000 people on social media, yet we feel more alone than ever before.
Yeah.
Because it's not physical contact. It's not like real people that you can touch straight away, and like you're living life together, sweating it out, bleeding it out, crying it out, laughing it out, dancing it out, like coming back to our passion.
Yeah.
When we can start to blueprint, that's what full spectrum medicine is. That's the other platform that I'm working on. It's essentially architecting the blueprint for the psychiatric renaissance. And that means for me, like, what does the future of psychiatric healthcare look like when we have the most sophisticated centers for healing and wellness and awakening possible, which does include the right use of plant medicines and psychedelic medicines. So psychedelic medical research is another kind of parallel path of my focus. And I had a whole chapter in the concussion repair manual on psychedelic medicines like ayahuasca and ibogaine and cannabis.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah.
And those medicines do stimulate brain-derived neurotrophic factors. There are people that have had severe experiences with a variety of chronic illnesses, including concussion, go through an ayahuasca experience over a period of time and get better. I took that part of the book out because mainstream medicine, even psychiatry, still thinks that psychedelic medicines are bullshit, and there's a huge judgment against them, but they don't deserve to be in Schedule 1. Check out Neurons to Nirvana, and it's got the whole backstory as why the Nixon administration put everything in Schedule 1, because they were freaked out during the Vietnam crisis. But these medicines don't belong there. They may be Schedule 2, because like ibogaine does have cardiac toxicity at high doses if you're not paying attention. But no one's ever died with LSD. No one's ever died with ayahuasca, unless they were taking a psychiatric medicine and didn't disclose it. Right. No one's ever died with cannabis. No one's ever died from psilocybin. And yet people die from pharmaceuticals all the time. There's a lower threshold for alcohol than any of those that I just mentioned. Yet alcohol's legal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously I could talk for days about this kind of stuff. But
I know, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, just like when we do blueprint the available technologies and the guidelines for the centers that we do see potential in investing into and starting up on our own as a grassroots movement. That's the only way anything has ever really changed significantly is from the populace, from the grassroots. And we can take our healthcare back, and that's what we want to do to be able to empower people to do again.
Yeah, I totally agree. One final question on one of the topics mentioned in your book. Lithium has been used for, bipolar, depression, PTSD, these types of things. What role does lithium play, do you think, on concussions?
Lithium's an amazing element. It's actually, I think, number 3 on the periodic table. It's a salt. And it has a bad rap because lithium carbonate is the usual prescription that's given to people in classic experiences of mania, because it helps to squelch that. It helps to calm that. It works as a calming agent in the brain. And yet there are more available delivery cofactors than carbonate to deliver lithium into the brain.
Wow.
So the one that we use is lithium orotate. Crosses the blood-brain barrier like 10 times better than lithium carbonate. So you don't need doses as high to get a therapeutic effect. The trouble with lithium carbonate, the prescription, is that at high doses, and you can monitor blood levels, at high doses it negatively affects the kidneys and the thyroid. And so it has toxicity associated with it, but it's a natural salt. And when you look at municipalities that have a higher lithium content in their water table, there's lower incidence of violence, depression, and mania. It's phenomenal when it just naturally happens at higher levels in the water system. So we use it to help with mood dysregulation, but it also helps to stimulate the healing, the inflammatory cascade after a traumatic brain injury. And you don't need huge doses for that. It also helps with fat metabolism. It helps with energy production in the cell. It's a variety of different things, and just kind of going through the mental Rolodex in my own mind. I know that it helps repair damaged neurons, and it brings back into balance the primary neurotransmitters like glutamate, GABA, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. These are great. I like these kind of questions because it takes me back to like the days when I was in
all the research
med school on my final exam, and I had to like go back and retrieve a file.
Yeah. And
you kind of like visualize the cabinet and look at the folder and then read the indications.
Right.
But lithium orotate, to sort of kind of come back to that issue around dosage, the usual dose to support metabolic improvement in the brain, as well as, again, just physiologic improvement with fat utilization and macronutrient utilization, is only like 5 to 10 milligrams.
Yeah, it's pretty small, isn't it?
Versus like lithium carbonate that's used in the psychiatric arena is like 600 to 1200 milligrams.
Wow.
Right? So we identify something that works, and then we give it super physiologic doses to the point that it causes toxicity. But, nature doesn't do that. Nature has everything in its complement and in its right order. When we get out of balance, it's great to be able to use super physiologic doses in an acute care management phase, but then you get back. So that acute care, like if I'm working with somebody with bipolar who's going through mania, which I've run clinics where we've helped people transition off of psychiatric medications before, and that's it's careful medicine, but it's highly beneficial. There's some great folks who are doing awesome work in this regard. The organization I was working with before is called Alternative to Meds, ATMC, in Sedona, Arizona. Just had a conversation with Kelly Brogan, who's kind of a psychiatric pioneer too. She may be actually somebody good for your radio show too. But we're recognizing that when we use something like 50 to 60 milligrams of lithium orotate to help people transition off of psychiatric medications, that's more of an acute care management. And then they may need 5, 10, 15 milligrams as a maintenance moving forward from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascinating stuff. So, Doc, where can people find this book? Because I know you sent me an advance copy, the Concussion Repair Manual, and I think we're going to time the release date of this to when your book comes out. But assuming it's available now when people are listening to it, where can people go get it?
Yes, our launch date for the book is October 17th.
Okay.
And they can go to Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, there's a variety of distributors. If they wanted to check it out online, that's probably the easiest for most people. The website is concussionrepairmanual.com.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And they can order it online straight. My other two platforms are fullspectrummedicine.com and drdaningle.com.
It's Full Spectrum Medicine and then Dr. Dan Engle. Okay, awesome.
I'm looking at the cover here. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks for sending us an advanced copy. This is really cool. What I love about it is there's so many different modalities. You're going everything from supplementation to food to grounding to earthing, to PEMF and magnetic therapy and all kinds of electrical stimulation and nootropics and cool stuff. And what I think is really cool about it too is that I would imagine that even if you don't have a concussion, all of these things are stimulative and incredibly healthy for the brain to prevent possible instances of a lot of people say they have Alzheimer's in their family, stuff like that. I mean, this would be a great preventative protocol too to follow. So,
agreed. Yeah, I think so. And it's a nice highlight in recognizing that oftentimes the things that help us repair are going to be also things that just help us maintain. The difference is usually dose, range, and intensity. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I was on podcast with Ben Greenfield maybe last month, and that's essentially what he said about the book. He's like, oh, great. Not only is it helpful to heal a brain, but it's just helpful to do these things in general to go, if your brain's already good, great, then make it even phenomenal.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool because, people that listen to this show and people like Ben Greenfield or the Bulletproof guy, Dave Asprey, people like that, JJ Virgin. I mean, all of our listeners are very, very smart, but a lot of people in the mainstream just think like, oh, wow, if I take some of your protocols here are glutathione, lithium, B12, carnitine, things like that. They think that, okay, these are going to be good for the brain, but what they don't realize is like vitamin C and B12 and methylcobalamin and glutathione. I mean, incredible for immune system, detoxification, pathway opening, all this kind of stuff. And it's like you're getting healthier all over your body just by doing some of these protocols that are specifically helpful for the brain, but incredibly helpful for other conditions as well, or just maintaining optimal health, so.
Yeah, globally beneficial for most physiologic function throughout the body.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, cool. So it's concussionrepairmanual.com, and the book officially becomes available October 17th, 2017. Is that right?
That's correct.
Awesome. Thanks, Doc, for being on, my friend.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for the conversation. It felt like we could have gone for quite a bit.
I know, right? Okay.
I always enjoy being on the show, so I look forward to the next time.
Awesome. Hang on there, Doc. We're going to just close out the show. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Make sure to go check out concussionrepairmanual.com, and we'll put a link on this show page for his book. You can get it on Amazon, and I kept a bunch of show notes for you, too. So if you want to check out the show page for this particular show, you can do that, and I'll let you know what that is later on in the wrap-up of the show. But thanks for listening. If you know anybody who has brain issues, traumatic brain injuries,
who
anything
doesn't
like
know
that.
somebody?
I know, right?
Like I've known a handful of people who have had concussions, if not worse, broken necks. I mean, all kinds of.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, Alzheimer's. I mean, everything.
Yeah, even people with Alzheimer's.
It spreads wide.
Yeah, so please pass the show on to them. We would appreciate it. And we love you guys a lot. And we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Kate and I have had our sauna for about a year now, I'd say, when we first got it from Phil Wilson. And it's an incredible machine. We use ours about every single day. Kate sits in about 20 minutes, and I sit in there about for a half hour. Usually watch a documentary, and it's extremely relaxing. It's really, really incredible machine. And if you go to extremelealthradio.com/sauna, you can learn all about it. We did an entire hour interview with Phil Wilson. You can check that out. You can look at the pictures of us with it. You can watch videos on that page. It helps you to sleep really, really well. You can lose a lot of weight with it. You can burn, I think, around 600 calories in about 20 minutes or so. It improves your skin, increases circulation all over the body, and circulation is critical for your health. You can prevent and reverse diseases with it. If you have a cold or flu, it's incredible. It heats you down to the core. It heats 4 to 6 inches inside your body, so it's really incredible. And a lot of people use it for cancer as well. So if you have any kind of incurable, quote, disease, you can use it for that. And Dr. Shade is the foremost authority on detoxification. And listen to what he says about it.
How do I detoxify from plastics? I mean, you guys are using a sauna, and what does a sauna do for us? A sauna is great. It's moving a number of different toxins. Remember, we talked about the mice that if you put PCBs in there, then that made the mercurial that much worse. And sweating moves out a lot of plastics, volatiles, fat-based toxins. It's really good at moving those out, sweating those out. So that's how you're getting those out, and those are contributing to this synergistic soup inside the body. And so that's why they're good, is they're taking out a bunch of the different things in the soup.
And Daniel Vitalis, one of our favorite guests. What do you have to say about the sauna?
When you go into the sauna, like a far infrared sauna like you discussed, your body goes into a deep relaxation mode, and your sympathetic nervous system shuts down and your parasympathetic nervous system turns on. And when that's active, that's the nervous system, part of your nervous system that's active when you meditate. That becomes active, and your detoxification pathways open up wide. Why is this important? It's important because when you go running and you sweat, you're not necessarily eliminating very much toxicity from your body. But when you sweat in the sauna, you eliminate a lot of toxicity from your body. So sweating in a relaxed state is how we eliminate. The other thing is that what's wonderful about the sauna is that it puts you in a parasympathetic nervous system response, like as if you were meditating. So it's almost a hack. It's like a trick to get yourself into a meditative, relaxed state, to decompress stress, to reverse the effects of stress, and to get your body eliminating deep, deep toxicity that's stored in your body fat because it can come out in the oils of your skin. So I think, sauna is one of the most crucial detoxification, really health practices that we could take on, especially in this era of heavy toxicity, particularly fat-soluble toxins.
This sauna is really, really great. They offer payment plans because if you buy it through PayPal, it's 100% secure. You don't even need a PayPal account. I think you could do a payment plan through PayPal. It's got low EMF electromagnetic fields coming off of it. It's portable, so that means you don't have to knock down a wall in your house. You can just move it from room to room. It sets up in about 2 to 5 minutes. It's super easy to clean. All you got to do is wipe it down when you're done and wipe the neck down. And it produces energy and heat inside very, very evenly throughout the whole machine. All you have to do is sit in there for about 15 minutes a day. And the great thing I like about it too is it requires zero preheating. So you turn it on and you're starting to get warm and you're starting to detoxify with that far infrared light almost immediately. So it's really great. It comes with a 1-year warranty. It's about $990 plus $25 shipping. And that's really, really a good deal because if you look at most of the regular saunas out there, they are in the $2,000 to $4,000 range. So this is really, really a good deal. So check it out, extremehealthradio.com/sauna. All right, there you go, Mr. Dan Engle. That was cool.
Dr. Dan throws the kitchen sink at all this stuff.
I know, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's a pretty comprehensive book. Have you been able to read any of it yet?
Just sort of skimmed through it. I want to actually share some, because I know people are listening, have people in their life that have stuff. So I want to share just a few things that he does. He talks about plant-only diets, the ketogenic diet, which is obviously helpful for brain health. Mm-hmm. Different things that you can eat, coconut oil, turmeric, eggs. He goes into all this kind of stuff. He talks about some of the things that you want to avoid.
Like what? Is it the stuff he talked about that you said, like the alcohol?
Yeah, and having another traumatic brain injury, obviously reducing the chances of that, but sugar, alcohol, things like that. But he just got a big, he talks about Chi Gong, he talks about inversion therapy, he talks about, gyroscopic repair, balance, and body weight training. heliotherapy, which is sun, sound therapy. So, earthing.
Such a broad range.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. So This is a good book. I would recommend it to anyone who has someone in their life that's dealing with this.
Yeah, I keep thinking of Tana. You mentioned our friend Tana and her husband Trey, who I love them. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting how Dan said, like laser therapy, some cold levels, so it just doesn't work for everybody. It's like you gotta, unfortunately, it is an expensive ordeal. It seems to be.
Right.
But throwing the kitchen sink at it with all these other things, because maybe one protocol isn't going to work for somebody else, but one works great for somebody. It's awesome that he has sounds like not hundreds of things to do, but many, many, many things that people don't really put all together. Thank God there's people like him doing that work to get a comprehensive guide to this stuff. It's so much deeper, and there's way more to it than I would have ever known. Yeah,
he talks about nootropics. I mean, isn't it crazy how it's just nuts how you could have one injury to your brain. You get hit in the face once with a soccer ball, you get into a fight or something.
You fall, you hit your head. I mean,
you fall, and now you have a list of 50 things that you have to do to get your brain back to the way it was after a split second.
I know.
It's so crazy how that works.
Such a bummer. Such a bummer. I'm encouraged by that, though. I mean, at least there's things I just remember all the little kids I knew growing up, that had concussions, or you'd be at a birthday party or someone hit their head on the side of the pool, or
really.
Yeah, and I feel like they would just be like, okay, they'd check your eyeballs to see if your pupils were dilating.
Right,
it was the sure tell sign that you had a concussion or not.
Yeah.
And then, if they didn't go to the hospital, you would just say, have somebody stay with them and make sure they're not falling asleep, or wake them up every hour and check on them. I mean, for a couple of days, I know that I had little friends that their parents would do that. And I thought, isn't that funny? I just remember that's what I think when I think concussion.
Yeah.
I think look at your pupils and then keep someone awake so they're not slipping off into this sleep of death. So it's really great to know that there's so much more going on than, it's come so far of what we even know on a scientific level,
Yeah.
of what really happens in the brain, what's going on when you have a concussion.
We know so little, don't we?
Yeah. Oh, I hate talking about brain stuff, though. It just creeps me out.
Does it?
Oh, it just makes me feel like your brain it's amazing. We're walking around at all and you have this thing floating around in a bunch of fluid in your head. Ugh. And
it's crazy too that we perform activities. I remember what's his name? Jerry Seinfeld's comedy bit, and he was talking about how we have these activities that we engage in as humans that are so dangerous that will cause us to have brain injuries and die. And so the solution to that isn't to stop doing the activity. The solution is just to put a little helmet on and keep doing it.
That's right. I remember that.
It's so funny.
Stick a little shell on the outside of your brain that basically runs everything.
But it's crazy, right?
It's true.
I mean, but, that would make a lot of sense for things like skateboarding and things. You know how people have been talking about in football and things to get rid of the helmets?
Yeah.
Because it sounds counterintuitive, but it would make more sense because without a helmet there, you can't slam into someone with the same amount of force. So it's true. It makes you want to protect your head too. So
do you think that would ever? I doubt that would ever go through.
Well, I doubt it because helmets are such a big part of football, and there's a big money making thing off of that. But I think they've done the studies where when people played with leather helmets or no helmets, there was the amount of concussions and traumatic brain injuries people had was significantly less.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
So,
wow.
Yeah,
just bubble wrap people's heads.
Yeah. Well, they're thinking about doing this, the same thing as with gloves in boxing and gloves in MMA. Well, actually just gloves in MMA. Because if you don't have any
thick padding.
Yeah, if you don't have that thick padding, you can't throw those huge bombs.
Loaded pump.
Yeah, because you're going to break your own hand.
Right.
So you can't be as aggressive, which would mean that the person receiving the punch wouldn't get as much force.
Right.
And trauma. So
gosh, that's stuff that's so counterintuitive.
Doesn't make sense, but it kind of does in a way.
Wow.
But yeah, crazy, right?
Wow. And that's just concussions. All this, it's not even we have a neighbor right behind our house whose brother is in a facility from a brain injury. He got hit on New Year's Day this last year. Or no, it was Super Bowl. Was it Super Bowl?
Super Bowl last year, I think. Yeah, just last Super Bowl, wasn't it?
Just this last year in January, I think.
Oh my gosh.
But right. He was riding home, father of 5 little boys, riding home his bike, and I don't even think it was dark yet, and some car just plowed into him, and he went sailing, and it's just gosh, if you land,
Do they have a
being hit by a
GoFundMe?
car. Yeah, I think.
Should I put a link to that?
That'd be cool.
I'll put a link to that.
They could really use all the help they can get, but I knew his wife back in the day, but it's just a bummer. It's that kind of stuff that, I'm glad that Dan's giving hope for the concussed people of the world, or people with any kind of thing. Like he says, Alzheimer's, like a bunch of brain stuff. But man, when we can start dealing with traumatic brain injuries where you're just not yourself anymore, and he's talking about lack of concentration, all these other horrible things that happen to people. But this is a guy who's wheelchair bound. Those are the kind of people I want to see making huge headway and actually coming out of these situations. We had another friend who was hit on his Vespa.
Oh yeah, died.
But he was in, I think it was a slow 1.5-year decline after he had gotten hit, but just never bounced back from that kind of a brain injury. Yeah.
He was? Mm-hmm. He was wearing a helmet.
Mm-hmm. So stuff happens, but
oh my gosh.
I'm just glad Dr. Dan's bringing hope to the world. And yeah, if anybody can help out this awesome family, we'll put a link to his GoFundMe. Yeah. Or whatever kind of thing they have up to help them.
Yeah, it's nuts. But what's cool is, like you said, we have all kinds of new understanding of how the brain works and different systems of the body. So now there's so many different solutions on different levels too.
It's a good time to be alive for sure.
Yeah. One of the other things I didn't think about is like doing things like, those brain exercises that you can do. What are they called? What is the main website for that?
Oh, to keep your, like those puzzles?
Yeah,
for
there's
your mind?
a main website for that. I'll try to find it.
I know what you're talking about. And they're encouraging people of all ages to do them to keep your brain sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is that called? I know what you're talking about.
Luminosity.
Okay.
Luminosity. I'll put a link to it. But there's all kinds of stuff, it's crazy to have a multi-layered approach from supplements to, magnetic therapies to energetic, acupuncture, neural therapy. There's so many different things we can do to stimulate and regenerate. Stem cells seem interesting as well.
So, yeah. And he said he hadn't done any of that personally, I think is what he said at the beginning, right? Yeah.
I wanted to ask him about hormone replacement therapy. These are all things that he speaks about in his book, but I wonder what the hormone does to the brain.
Yeah. I saw that too.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Is he saying that in a positive, like it helps, or he's saying it's a bad thing?
Yeah, this is one in chapter 2. This is one of his interventional therapies.
Got you. Gotcha.
So, neurofeedback. That's interesting. Just so many different things. It's cool. I'm glad there's people out there doing this kind of work.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Cool.
I'm really curious too to see what he brings forth with the hyperbaric oxygen.
Oh man.
Because that's something that I want to get into. I want to get one of those machines one day, or
I know you've said that.
Tanks or
right,
whatever they're called.
If they become more affordable, and do they take up a bunch of space?
I think about the same amount as our bed here, or maybe a little bit more.
This massage table.
Yeah.
Right.
It
not bad.
It sits up.
So it's not going to overtake someone's whole house or anything.
No. No, but. Pretty cool,
go
right?
Dan. What isn't he working on?
I know.
It's pretty neat.
Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. So if you want to check out the links, we'll try to put as many of these links that we talked about in today's show. At the beginning of the show, you probably already heard it, so it doesn't matter. But I'll say what show number this is going to be, because we're going to try to time this to the date of his book launch. So I don't know what number it will be at this point. But when I do the intro, when I record the intro, I'll put the show notes or the actual show number for this particular episode. But if you want to grab all the notes, they'll be on this episode for this show. I also want to let you guys know too, we are opening an Extreme Health Academy very soon. We're partnering with Dr. John Bergman. So I know I talk about that a lot, but so I won't belabor that here. But if you want to take your health to the new levels, or recover from any kind of catastrophic injuries or chronic health issues, this is going to be the place for you. This is going to be the biggest online membership website in the alternative and natural health field in the world. So we're super proud to be partnering with Dr. John Bergman, who is an amazing guy, and he lives just locally to us. So this is going to be a really cool place for all of us to come together and to heal and to experience greater levels of health. So if that's what you want, if you want to do that or check more into that, go to extremehealthacademy.com, and you can find out more about what we've got going on there and how it all works and how it can benefit you. So make sure to check that out. Also, make sure to check out our store as well. We've got lots of great products in our store, more products added all the time. The latest one is the IMRS mat, which is a PEMF, which is very similar to the Beamer mat that Dr. Dan mentioned. And we love our IMRS mat. So make sure to check that out. There's a bunch of bonuses that you get if you contact our buddy Bryant Myers, and he's got a bunch of bonuses for you. But our store has lots of really, really great and unique stuff, so make sure to check that out. Is that about it?
I think so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your support, guys.
My brain is reeling from that brain show.
Time to go eat breakfast.
Yeah, I know, right?
All right, guys.
I think I need some fish oil.
Some fish oil. Yeah. Fish oil for breakfast.
Yeah. Why not?
Sounds scrumptious. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for passing our show on to your friends and sharing it. We really appreciate that, and we'll catch you guys on the next show.
No material on this blog is intended to suggest that you should not seek professional medical care. Always work with qualified medical professionals, even if you educate yourself in the field of live food, nutrition, and alternative medicine. I'm not a doctor, nor am I offering readers medical advice of any kind. None of the information offered here should be interpreted as a diagnosis of any disease, nor an attempt to treat or prevent any disease or condition. While information in this blog is discussed in the context of numerous conditions,